You all read the standing order I referred you to. And so I will not read it to you. What the tellers have submitted. The ayes 137. The noes 136. Honorable members, you have to as you sit, God created the human being in a very beautiful way. As I'm looking at you, I can't see my back. That is how you are. As you sit, you can't see your back. As I sit, I can see your front, I can see your back. As you sit, you can see my front, you can see my back. I go by the rules, and that's what I'm applying. Please, I will not do anything untoward. If you want, see me in chambers. Honorable members, with this, the Excise Duty Amendment Bill 2022 is read the third time and passed. Honorable members, clause 1.
Imposition of levy.
We have two proposed amendments to clause 1.
So those were excerpts of what happened in Parliament yesterday. So Parliament yesterday passed three very crucial bills, and you have the Excise Duty Amendment Bill, the Growth and Sustainability Levy Bill, then you have the Ghana Revenue Authority Bill, and the Income Tax Amendment Bill. So that's 4. Now remember, I said to you at the beginning of the show that we're going to the IMF. The IMF has given us things that we need to do in order to give them sort of a complimentary assurance that we're really committed to the deal. And one of it, there's several of them, but one of it is that we needed to pass this bill because we needed to show them that we have what it takes to generate enough revenue to be able to plug the loopholes within our fiscal space. And that's exactly what Parliament did yesterday. The minority were there in their numbers, 136, majority 137. But something untoward happened. Maybe Mutala will tell us about that. There was an MP who got involved in an accident and was still, he was still actually made to come to Parliament to vote in favor of the bill. So that's what has happened. But you need to understand what these revenue measures are and how that impacts you. And that's what Mr. Joe Jackson is going to be doing justice to in a few minutes. He's going to do a presentation of these revenue, these tax handles, and what it means for the corporate world and also for us as individuals. So I don't know how you intend to approach this presentation. So what do you have for us, Mr. Joe Jackson?
First of all, I have this.
But before you do this, let me just do this. I need to, in line with protocol, say that we have a government spokesperson on governance and security. That's the man in charge of governance and security matters. He speaks on behalf of government on these issues. That's Mr. Pargrave Washidan Kwesi with us.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's good to be here.
Included?
Like the minister for.
No, he's happy to be doing. He's happy to be doing this for.
Like my good friend Kojo Ponkuruma. his work is taken over by someone.
This is purely speculated.
No, this
is purely speculated. Mr. Jackson, please, what do you have for us?
Listen, first of all, we got to understand that there are three revenue measures.
Right.
And like I always say, Ghana is broke. When you are broke, you try and earn more income.
Oh, please come forward. Please come forward.
Okay.
Please come forward a bit.
You try and earn more income, and then you also reduce how much you are spending.
Right.
So it's important to look at this.
Okay.
The amendment was going to give us 1.29 billion.
Okay.
Now,
Put all of that together.
yes, the amendment was going to give us 1.29 billion.
Okay.
Now, the amendment is going to hit you because if you earn whatever income tax you are going to pay, you would realize that starting from next month, it is going to go up. Yes. Of course, there's the excise duty amendment. That is going to hit at people who are producing, exporting, etc. But the one I want you to be really worried about is the growth and sustainability levy.
Okay.
That's going to give us 2.2 billion. Right? Remember that the excise duty amendment will only give us 450 million. Okay. But let's go to this. That's where the problem comes. And the problem is huge. 5% of profit before tax is going to be paid by all these institutions, banks, non-banks, insurance companies, the telcos, the breweries, the inspection companies, the bulk oil distributors, and the oil marketing companies. Now, I want you to remember this. Already, truly, this is the list of the companies that pay the most tax in Ghana. What someone did was to look at the companies that pay the most tax in Ghana and say, on top of whatever tax they're paying, I levy them 5% of all their profit before tax.
Okay.
But the key thing is that there's the law of unintended consequences.
Right.
You've already gone through your domestic debt exchange program. The banks, the non-banks, the insurance companies, they are suffering disproportionately from this domestic debt exchange program to the point where we are asking for recapitalization. We think some of them may be insolvent. In fact, there have been estimates by certain professionals who even think up to 9 may be insolvent already. And you are levying them another 5% before tax. On top of last week, increasing their capital adequacy ratio from to 14%. There's something wrong here. And we must be seriously concerned about the health of our financial sector. But let's go on. Now, the productive sector. We keep talking about the productive sector. What do? We say 1% of all their gross production will be levied. This one is not about profit. 1% of all the value that they produce will be levied. It will affect the mining companies. It will affect upstream oil companies. Maybe we don't feel sympathetic about these companies. But I beg you, this one is the catch. For the rest of you, anybody who is not in this category, whatever you earn, the government is going to take an additional 2.5% of profit before tax. Every single Ghanaian company, every single Ghanaian enterprise, every single Ghanaian sole proprietorship, 2.5%. So let nobody be deceived. This current
this financial, how do you call it?
revenue enhancement
Right.
is not only from the banks. They are suffering. Maybe me, I have to go and deal with my own issues at Delex. But if you are a paid worker, your income tax is going up. If you are a business, your income tax is going up. That's where we stand.
Let me start with Mr. Pargrave Washington before I even come to the Member of Parliament. Now, You belong to a political party that came to power with the promise that you're going to move us from from taxation to production. So when people see these taxes being introduced, they keep asking why, and the feeling that you have disappointed them, you have deceived them, you've betrayed them. How do you respond to people who say such things about the ruling party?
Mora, very good morning to you and to my colleagues on the panel and to the Ghanaian people who are viewing. Definitely, I belong to a political party and a government that promised a lot of hope to the Ghanaian people, and we have delivered on a number of promises, 100% of those. I belong to a government that, in fulfilling all of our promises, has also been berated with a global challenge, and I'm sure that we've had all those conversations in the past years. The successes that this government has chalked cannot be compared comparatively to earlier governments who have not faced similar challenges that we have faced. I think that the question really is that what is government doing in the midst of the challenges that we are in? And our government has been extremely resolute in going up front in ensuring that we join the global world in having an IMF conversation. Now, we have had those conversations right up from July of last year, 2022. We reached a staff-level agreement in December of 2022. We went into a conversation for our domestic debt exchange program, which we successfully finished up. We also came along to ensure that there was tariff adjustment, which is in relation to some measures that the IMF put together. We also had to onboard the GET fund and also ensure that District Assembly's Common Fund, the Road Fund on the gift mix was also put in place. And yesterday, I mean, I must commend Parliament and the members of Parliament for passing the 4 revenue bills. Now, we have come a long way with domestic revenue mobilization, and it's important that for a country that wants to develop in the manner in which we all do want to develop, like the Asian tigers, like the Americas and the UKs and Europe, it's important that we become creditably responsible for our own development by paying taxes. I can appreciate the expansion and knowledge that Mr. Joe Jackson has brought to bear, but uneasy lies the head that wear the crown. These bills are key for Ghana's development. Everyone needs to bear a good brunt of that. I mean, we've heard about the fact that government has cut down expenditure. I mean, everyone has asked that government should cut down expenditure, and government has cut down expenditure right up from last year. You recall when we cut down expenditure from April of 2022, and then even there was an extension of the expenditure cuts when the president had the economic address on the 31st of October 2022 and extended that into 2023. And so clearly, as a government, we are taking the burden and also ensuring that the challenges that have berated us, we meet them head front. And I'm convinced, I mean, Moro, in bringing this subject in terms of my first preliminary comments, I'm very convinced that in the very shortest possible time, especially within this Q2, we would have the IMF grant us our loan that we are requesting for.
Moro, I want to make a little interjection.
That's fine. Please go ahead.
You know, you are asking Ghanaians to pay more. Listen, these revenue measures, they cover the full spectrum.
Yeah.
Everybody has to pay more. If you are self-employed, you pay more. If you are a worker, you pay more. The least you can do is to reduce the size of government so that we will also feel that you are sharing the burden. The frustration with this is not because we don't see that it is required, but we don't feel that the burden is being shared equally. And we've been screaming and shouting, reduce the size of government. We've looked at what happened in...
But Mr. Joe Jackson, a government that started with 125...
Côte d'Ivoire.
No, a government that started with 125 now has 85. That's a significant drop
Côte
in the
d'Ivoire
numbers.
is down to in the 30s. And they are similar size. And it's not just the ministers. It's the appointees.
Right.
If it was just the ministers, we could deal with it.
Okay.
It's the appointees. It's the whole setup. How many appointees do we have? How much are they being paid? Let's not reduce this argument to that of ministers alone.
Right.
We can reduce the size of ministers, but even more important, reduce the size of appointees. Show us. It's a sign of good faith. Anyway, it was just meant to be an interjection.
I don't know what response you have for this, because this matter keeps coming up. In fact, one of the reasons why Ghanaians or some Ghanaians are upset with the NDC is also because they failed to let that happen. So it tells you the extent to which Ghanaians would want this to happen. Why do you think the difficulty lies really in the president saying that, look, I'm going to reduce the size a bit more? I don't know whether you have any responses to that on that, but let me quickly go to Honorable Murtala, and then I can come back to you on this
Okay,
first
sure.
thing.
Okay.
John Murtala, I'm told that you guys have lost the moral authority to comment on the issues about reducing the size of government.
Moro, first
you got the opportunity,
Moro,
and you blew that opportunity.
First and foremost,
Yes.
Prof. Mills appointed 75 ministers in total.
True.
10 regions, and they included regional ministers and deputy regional ministers. President Mahama appointed 85 ministers,
Right.
including regional ministers and deputy regional ministers. The first term, and in fact, up to even part of the second term of this government, they appointed over 100 ministers. And I'll come to those needless and useless portfolios created by this government just to enrich their teeming mass. Over 100. That was the first time in the history of this country that we've had such large size, 120 ministers. Now, I hear them say that, yes, they have reduced it to 86 ministers, and that 16 regions, and that when the NDC had 10 regions, NDC had 80, President Mahama had 85 ministers with 10 regions. The 10 regions included deputy regional ministers. So if you take 10 ministers and deputy regional ministers, that is 20. Now you have taken away the deputy regional ministers. So if you take the deputy regional ministers out, you are only having 15 ministers. 16 ministers. So that is a misleading statement that they repeatedly make. That yes, we have reduced it, yet they have failed to tell the people of this country that with the pressure exerted on them, they have taken away the deputy regional minister. The 85 president or 86 president Mahama, no, 85 president Mahama had included deputy regional ministers, even though the regions were 10. So 10 deputies, 10 substantive, 20. You have taken away the deputies, you are left with 16, so you have 16 ministers. So the number is still huge. But Moro, it is important, and I'm going to make my point based on what Mr. Jackson said. Some interesting appointments by this government. And his role, I won't talk about it because he's my friend. Even though that portfolio, a portfolio has been created for him. I don't even know.
You say you do friendship when it comes to party.
Yes,
party position.
you see, I'm fasting, so I want to be a bit charitable to my good friend. He doesn't even have office. He's on salary. That's some of the useless portfolios created by this government.
I have an office.
Where? Another burden on the taxpayer.
I have an office.
Another burden on the taxpayer. He could have been attached.
Just to correct that
he could have been attached.
I have an office.
He has an
office. You know I have an office.
So another burden.
You have visited me. Office.
No, I haven't.
You haven't yet come to the office.
No, I haven't visited your office.
But I have an office.
I have an office. Please don't digress. You are walking us through a list.
Let me finish. They treat him and my good friend Kojo Ponkron like outcasts. They don't need you in their government. That's what they are doing. So look, you have youth ambassador for diaspora affairs on the taxpayer. You have policy associate on the taxpayer. Chief executive of public sector reforms on the taxpayer. Overseer of the National Cathedral, that robbery in the name of God, on the taxpayer. You have church relations manager on the taxpayer. Diaspora church mobilization officer on the taxpayer. God will be very angry at this government. Focal person, la francophonie. In fact, I don't even know, even though my wife is French, I don't even know what it means. On the taxpayer. Technical director, la francophonie, on the taxpayer. Coordinator, special development initiative secretariat, on the taxpayer. Director of Special Project on the taxpayer. Manager of Operations and Programs. For what? On the taxpayer. 5 technical communication assistants. 5 technical communications assistants. You have ministers, and that's why I said, Kojo, if I were him, I would have resigned. The gentleman who was embroiled in grabbing series of properties has been handed over the duties of communication of this government in his hands. You have technical advisor, Zongo Development Authority. Do we still have the Zongo ministries? Then you still have a technical advisor. You have 2 technical advisors, Special Development Initiative Secretariat, technical advisor, political affairs. You could have handled that one with your position. Presidential staffer, NAPCO. NAPCO is dead and gone. You have a presidential staffer. Office Management Executive Associates. Technical Director to the Presidential Advisor on Media. You have Data Manager. I mean, it's ridiculous. And anytime they come to justify some of this, right, there he went. That yes, we are faced with a lot of challenges than the previous administration. For the avoidance of doubt, the previous administration didn't borrow almost 500 billion. Almost 500 billion. President Mahama borrowed in total 42 billion. A little over 42 billion. You borrowed 480 plus billion. Now, the previous administration, the tax to GDP was just a little over 60%. Today, over 104%. The previous administration, dollar to cedi.
Debt to GDP, not tax to GDP.
Sorry, debt to GDP. Yeah. The previous administration, the dollar rate to the cedi was just 3.7, let's even say 4. Today, what is it? 12 to 13 cedis, they are celebrating it. As a matter of fact, there are monumental projects that you can see. The only project we can see under this government with the borrowing is how fat appointees of this government have become. That is the only project. And how flashy the lifestyle they live. Look, there was a gentleman I used to do news file with him. He was driving, what's the name? That small car. What's the name? Eh?
Is it Tico?
Not Tico. Cooper.
Oh, a Cooper, yeah.
And I remember one day.
That's an expensive car.
Small one. Oh, master, what expensive?
Yeah, Cooper's expensive.
I'm saying that Cooper was just Queen Cooper. We know those expensive ones. And I remember one day, we finished news file. And this is a true story. And I told him about this work. I said, oh, he's driving it because of spaces, where to park. Today, when that gentleman drives, he drives with almost 3 Land Cruisers. 1 and 2 are following him with motorcade. So the spaces for parking in Accra have actually expanded. Because if the reasons for driving the Cooper was because to make it convenient for him to find spaces to park, today he drives with fleet of cars because the spaces in Accra have actually expanded. He now has a lot of spaces to park his car. All the monies President Mahama borrowed included a lot of projects, and don't go anywhere. The regional hospitals, the Circle Interchange, the phase 1 of the Pokwasi Interchange, phase 1 of the Obechebelamte Interchange, the University of... I mean, many projects. What do you have to show? Nothing to show. Absolutely nothing. Yet you have the temerity to tell the people of this country that we didn't mismanage the economy, or we are not mismanaging the economy as you were, without a scintilla of evidence. In fact, the point you are making, presidential staffers, and do you know they're entitled to Article 71, office holders' benefits? The burdensome of such on the state is extremely worrying. Look, Moro, I was a deputy minister of state. I never had a police officer following me. Today you have presidential staffers. When they move with military officers. They live in state bungalows. Moro, as a deputy minister and a member of parliament, I stayed at Caprice for 2 years. It had to take the national security to insist I move from that place. Because I was living there before I became a member of parliament and a minister. And it never had any problem with the comfort I wanted to live in. 2 years. This government, some of them have gone to state bungalows, changed the tiles and put ceramics. That is the level of corruption. In fact, the CDD has described this government as the most corrupt. And if you challenge that fact too, go and look at the
Afrobarometer survey?
No, not the Afrobarometer.
Corruption Perception Index.
Corruption Perception Index. The highest we ever chalked in this country was under President Mahama, 48%. The lowest of President Mahama is what you are celebrating today. Yet, they have the courage to look into our miserable faces and tell us that, oh, we are better than the previous administration. In all fronts, whether the sanctity and the decency in governance, you are next to none. Okay. Whether how we manage the economy, the projects that we executed, right. The borrowing of President Mahama, they were borrowed to invest in capital expenditure. Okay. We bequeath to you 2 additional oil wells, 2. Esla, nobody is talking about it. The Esla levy.
We have only 5 minutes.
So the Esla levy. So I mean, to be very honest, if I were you, you are so courageous that you even have the courage to come and sit on this program to defend some of this. You should be run away. A lot of your colleagues, when they invite them to come on program, they don't want to come because it's embarrassing to push an elephant through the eye of a needle. Yet you desperately want to do
Mr.
that.
Mr. Bache-Dankwa, what's your response to some of the things he said? And then Mr. Joe Jackson would wrap it all up.
You know, Moro, I think that, you see, we can have conversations of this nature in a very constructive manner.
Right.
We are here to really look at the way forward as a country and some of the measures that our government is putting in place.
The way they are treating him.
When we raise issues that dates back to emotional sentiments, I think that it doesn't help foster the development of this country. We can have a time where we can do the comparisons very well. I think that we're at a stage where Parliament has done extremely well for passing these revenues. Our government is extremely very confident in seeking the IMF deal, and we are also very confident that we will restore the Ghanaian economy. And I think that we should steer the conversations towards that manner. And yes, very difficult and challenging times for everyone. Government, as a listening government, continually would listen to every single thing that the people are saying, as far as it's in sync with a lot of our ethos and policies as a country. But I mean, foregoing, we want to develop this country. We want to see that this country is on the right path, and we are putting the measures in place and the platforms in place to make sure that that happens.
Mr. Joe Jackson, we were told in just 2 minutes, because that's the only time we have, that by the end of March, if we don't get an IMF deal, the economy will crash. Or the crisis would worsen. From your standpoint, is that likely?
It's a tough question. I tell you what, it is very clear that we're going to go through increasingly more difficult times in the months ahead until the
IMF deal is sealed.
The IMF deal is sealed. On the other hand, to be fair, the support that came from the US over the last few days, obviously backing that proposal, and the geopolitical sentiment means that we may stave off disaster for... Yes. And remember that right now, the only thing really left for us to get the deal before the board is the issue of negotiating with our external parties.
That's what is left.
We remain, there's a little bit to do with GIFMIS and moving the some of the funds, statutory funds onto GIFMIS. There's a little issue with that. I don't think that has been completed yet.
Okay. And then there's the China negotiations, or there's the external creditors negotiations.
So that I'm asking me a question.
Yes.
Government is having these taxes because the IMF have asked government to cut expenditure.
Or improve
revenue. So there are two ways.
Yes.
You either improve revenue or you cut expenditure.
Great.
This government is unwilling
to cut expenditure.
That's inaccurate.
But that's what is happening.
The government has cut expenditure.
So
that's inaccurate.
But
Moro, you're still planning to borrow 60 billion.
Yes, but the government has cut expenditure.
Moro, do you know yesterday? Moro, yesterday about the government has cut expenditure. Moro, yesterday,
from
to
March
tell you how cruel this government is.
We're still cutting expenditure.
A member of parliament had an accident. The first thing that a decent-minded group of people should do is to send the person to the hospital. The car somersaulted. They brought him to vote. That is how cruel this government is.
Thank you very much.
And I feel very hurt about it because he's my nephew.
Which MP is this?
My nephew is enough.
Okay.
I don't
All
want to mention the concerns.
So I want to thank you very much for joining us again for another edition of Inside Pages. I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Al Dumoro. Thanks for watching. I want to thank these persons for making it for joining us on the show. Mr. Joe Jackson of Dalex Finance, Mr. Pagre Boachidankwa, government spokesperson on governance and security, Mr. Murtala Mohammed, Member of Parliament for Honorable Murtala Mohammed, Member of Parliament for Tamale Central, Madam Ablagoma Shi, Member of Parliament K2 South, and Dr. Bernard Tutu Banahine. Thank you very much for watching another edition of Inside Pages. My name is Aldo Moroth. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.